Hey, good evening, everybody. I'm sorry we're running a couple of minutes late, but I wanted to make sure I could actually give you what I promised to give you this evening on our interviewing and screening wholesale sellers call. If you will look at the GoToWebinar panel, you'll see that there are two handouts attached. And one of them is a flow chart that I'm going to show you in a moment, and the other one is the seller interview form that we are going to be going through this evening to show you how to have these conversations with your potential wholesale sellers. So our purpose this evening is to help those of you who are going to be attending my Wholesaling Academy in Philadelphia on May the 18th through 21st, or here in Cincinnati in August, to understand how to start the work of rounding up and talking to sellers for the immediate practical purpose of bringing leads to class, so that I can help you evaluate them and decide, have you got a motivated seller? Is it, something that you ought to be going out to look at, putting under contract and selling for a $5,000 to $10,000 profit? Or is this one of the ones that just really, needs to be put on a callback list, and, maybe at some point the seller will be motivated, because it is such a key skill to be able to tell the difference between the motivated and unmotivated sellers. I just had an hour-long conversation with one of my mentoring students, literally just, and part of what we were talking about was how important it is to bring in lots of leads, of course, and she's doing that, but to be able to tell pretty quickly whether this is going anywhere or not. And part of that is the evaluation, but part of it is just the conversation with the seller. I know a lot of you guys worry about, especially if you're just getting started, that you're going to have some conversation with the seller and you're going to mess it up so badly that somebody who is willing to give you their house with a spectacular wholesale price is going to not want to work with you anymore. And that is just not true. And if you don't believe that, you need to talk to some more sellers. You need to come to the Hands-On Wholesaling Academy so that you can watch me talk to some sellers, because if you are not doing this, you're not doing this part of it, you're not going to make any deals, and you're not going to make any money. And your purpose in being in wholesaling is not to spin your wheels and study and think about stuff. It's to actually get out there and get hands-on and do it. So basically, we're going to be covering the seller interview form, what the process looks like, what questions you need to ask in order to figure out whether there's a deal on the line or not, and what to do when it's pretty clear you need to get out of the conversation. And of course, if you are not signed up for the Hands-On Wholesaling Academy, you need to do that. I only do it a couple of times a year, and I'm constantly getting this question, when are you doing your next Wholesale Academy? I'm telling you, it is May the 18th through 21st in Philly. So if you're up on the East Coast, or Philly's cheaper for you to get to, come to that. It's in a couple of weeks. Or we have the one in Cincinnati that is August 25th through 28th. And, now that I'm looking at those dates, I'm not 100% sure that's accurate. I'm going to double check that's the date. But it's the last Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday in August. And it's super cheap to attend. It's $19.97 to attend, 100% money back guarantee. You'll love it. And if you don't love it, get your money back. And B, if you don't make an extra $10,000 within 90 days of the academy, return the course materials and get your money back. So just big picture, the wholesaling process, or the decision tree, if you will, about what happens to get to a wholesale deal looks like this. Now, don't try and copy it. You don't need to copy it. It's attached as a handout. on the GoToWebinar panel there. You generate leads. You interview the sellers, which is what we're talking about tonight. You make a determination about whether or not the seller is motivated based on his answers to the questions. And when we get to the questions, you'll understand how you do that. If the seller is not motivated, you file him for future follow-up. So many, many sellers that you talk to are people who are going to say things along the lines of, well, I'm really not thinking about selling my house, but I did get your letter, so I figured I'd call and see what you would give me. Now, if you're getting a lot of that, you need to look and see if your marketing is good. Because I've seen some people that they tell me that they're getting a way too high percentage of sellers who seem to be more calling to get a free comprehensive market analysis than they are to sell their properties. And when I look at their marketing, it's because they're offering a free comprehensive marketing analysis somewhere in their letter or postcard. It says, even if you're not thinking about selling, give me a call and I'll tell you what your property's worth. And you wonder why you get that call. That's a total waste of your time. Take that out of your marketing. In any case, if it's one of those, you get off the phone as soon as possible. We'll talk about how to do that. You might want to put those folks on a call them back every 3 months list, right? If they do sound motivated, then you've got some due diligence to do. You're going to figure out what the after repaired value is of the property, figure out what the repair costs are, use your formula, make an offer. If the offer is accepted, then you continue on to the next phase, which is sign the purchase agreement. At that point, you do two things simultaneously. Number one, you start the title work to make sure the seller can actually sell, and you also find a buyer. And then once you found the buyer, you assign your contract and you get paid. If your offer is not accepted, if you've gotten to that stage, if you've gotten to the stage where you did decide the seller was motivated, you did your analysis, you made your offer, and your offer was rejected, that person goes on an every 30-day follow-up list. Because if you made the decision that they were pretty motivated, but I don't know, they're just holding out for more money or whatever, you need to call them a lot more often and see how things are going. So the way this looks is it's like a funnel, and you want to put as many leads into the top of the funnel as possible, because the funnel gets smaller as you go down. Lots of folks, you want lots of folks calling you, you will talk to most of them. I'll actually give you a couple of tips about when to just not talk to people during this class. Of those that you interview, you will not evaluate all of the deals, because the ones where the seller says, look, I know I'm asking too much and I'm not going to take less than this, there's no reason to go do a bunch of evaluation on that property. So you'll evaluate fewer than you interview, and you'll negotiate with fewer than you evaluate, and you will successfully close fewer than you negotiate with. So the more leads are coming in the top, the more deals are going to come out the bottom, right? The number is about 5%. You've heard that many, many times. So it takes about 20 motivated sellers to get to an actual deal. So the part that we're focusing on tonight of this flowchart is the part about interviewing the sellers, figuring out if they are motivated or not, and making this as quick as possible. Now, I'm gonna give you some real good hardcore advice tonight. You're going to get a lot out of the call. You're going to get a lot more out of coming to the Wholesale Academy. Like, that's 4 days of let me walk you through what it looks like to do a deal. But you know how you're going to get really good at this? Practice. The purpose of coming to the Wholesale Academy is to learn how to practice. But the first few times you do this, you're going to be like, this is so slow. She told me I should be able to do this whole process in 15 minutes, and it's taking me 3 hours. Yeah, it'll take you 3 hours the first few times, but it's worth going through that because you get better and better and faster and more confident. And of course, there's the money at the end that makes it totally worth it. So your primary tool for doing all of this process is the seller lead sheet. And if you look at, once again, if you look at the GoToWebinar panel there on the side, you're going to see that there is an attachment, and that attachment looks like this. I can't put it all on one page, so the attachment is a full page. This is just the top of the page, but this is the thing you're looking for. I use this every single time I talk to a seller. And if I am not the one talking to the seller, if it's my acquisitions coordinator who's talking to the seller, or if it was a virtual assistant talking to the seller, they would be using it too. If you have another lead sheet that you pulled from something else, because this is also for those of you who have my home study course, it's on the forms desk. And it's a great idea to print out like 100 of them and keep them by your phone in your car, right? So that you always have one around to fill out. If you have one of the other lead sheets I've seen floating around that only has like 6 or 7 questions on it, and it's very oriented toward pushing sellers into seller finance deals, those are fine for those deals, but you need this sheet for wholesale deals. Seller finance deals are different. Seller finance deals, you're looking for people who have houses that don't have things wrong with them. Our wholesale deals have things wrong with them. So you need this full sheet. Mr. Drew, there's some questions on the panel about downloading the form. Can you just type the answers to those for those folks?
Sure. I'll take care of it.
So thanks. So some technical stuff to go through before we get to the actual lead sheet is who is going to be reading the questions. Is it going to be you? Is it going to be a virtual assistant? Is it going to be an answering service? Who is it going to be? Because at some point, every seller needs to be asked every single question. Having an answering service that's just forwarding you a seller's name and phone number doesn't do you much good. Somebody has to ask these questions, and I don't care who it is. Now, I think that when you're first getting started, it really should be you. I think you should do your first 100 seller interviews yourself, even if that means you come home from work at 6 o'clock at night and you work from 7 to 9 returning seller calls. And the reason I say that is that there is absolutely no substitute for talking to sellers for you to start to determine, A, that they're mostly nice people, B, that there are such things as motivated and unmotivated sellers, and it's not that hard to tell the difference. D, that, or I think I'm only at C, that that you can get a lot of information that you need before you ever get in your car and go look at a property. And D, doing it yourself helps you create the systems that you can then pass on to somebody else to do. And I think that's hard to do when you really have no idea of what's going to happen. If it's going to be a virtual assistant or an answering service, how is the information going to be shared with you? Now, most of the time, my initial calls are taken by my acquisitions coordinator. He's not virtually, actually works in my office. And I've had 6 or 7 acquisitions coordinators in the last 15 years, and they have different ways that they like to do this. Some of them have liked to handwrite out the answers to the questions and then scan them and send them to me by email. Some of my more tech savvy students have set up Podio for this purpose, and they let their assistants put the information in Podio, and they just go look at Podio. Whatever that's going to be, you do have to think it through and figure it out. My current one likes to type it out on the Word document online and send it. So something there because every seller needs to get this interview. If you're not doing the interview, you're going to have to think through how it's going to be shared. Are you going to get emails? Or are you going to have a database like REI Black Book? How's that going to work? So every question on this form needs to be asked by you and answered by your seller, and there is a reason for every single question. The big purpose of the interview is for you to decide whether you want to work with this seller. Now, see, that's a huge brain shift for some of you. A lot of you think that the purpose of this initial interview is for you to talk the seller into working with you, and that ultimately that may end up being the case toward the end. But at the beginning, it's just to find out if they have the property, if they have the location, if they have the motivation that you need to be interested in working with them, and that takes a lot of the pressure off of starting these conversations with the seller, because like 60% of the time, seriously, wrong deal, not motivated, sellers just curious about where you got their names. I mean, you get all kinds of people who will call you who don't really want to sell their property, or it's the wrong property. I got a call today. I don't even know where it came from somebody who has what I think is a mobile home park, and it's in a place in Ohio that's like so far out in the boonies. It's like I live in Cincinnati, and it's like between Columbus and Athens. So if I were to try and drive to this place, I'm pretty sure it's like a 2.5 hour drive. I don't need to have a real long conversation with that person, because I don't buy mobile home parks, and I don't buy them out there in the middle of nowhere, certainly. 20% of your calls, so 60% of your calls are either going to be wrong property, wrong area, not motivated. 20% are going to be what I call motivated but not ready. So motivated but not ready means they really do need to sell, not just want to sell, they need to sell. But their price doesn't reflect that. They're singing a country song, right? My wife left me, my dog bit me, my pickup truck broke down, I needs to sell my house, but I want twice as much for it as anybody's going to pay. So they're telling all the right story, but they haven't tested the market long enough to know that they're not going to get their perfect price for it. So that 20% is going to be a full conversation. You're going to ask them all the questions, and you're going to tell them that you can't do for them what they would like you to do for them. So you're going to say, wow, I hear that you would have really, in a perfect world, like to get the $265 you paid for that house, but you also told me you ripped the kitchen out and never put it back in. So it's not actually the same house it was when you bought it, and 10 years have passed, and it's going to need some stuff. So I mean, I gotta be honest with you. I'm going to tell you, and I think most people are going to tell you, I'm going to be at like 165, and I know, I get it. That's not going to work for you, but I guess best bet is list it with an agent. Can I call you in 30 days and see how it's going? Right. That's 20% of your calls. And then the last 20% are going to be the ones who are motivated and already pretty reasonable about the price. And it's that 20% that you're going to run your comps. You're going to sort of try to do a little bit of an evaluation of repair costs based on what he has said, what the seller has said the properties need. and you're eventually going to go out and make an offer on that property. So determine whether you want to work with them, build some rapport so that they want to work with you. Best way to build rapport is to be really interested in the seller and his situation and what he wants. So you will notice that the order of the question is that there's these easy, non-threatening, non-scary questions first. What's your name? What's your number? Don't ask that question if you called them. I watched a student do that the other day. She called back a seller and then said, in case we get cut off, what's your number? Property address, neighborhood, school district, how'd you hear about me? Right? All easy questions. What is it one family, two family? What is it? Is it a rental or do you live there? How many rooms, bedrooms, and baths? You know, how old the house is. Now that's a question that sometimes people say, well, I don't know, it's old. So don't get too obsessed about, well, what year was it built? Does it have, what's the construction? Is it brick or frame? Does it have a basement? Does it have off-street parking? Does it have a garage? Does it have public utilities? Right? Does it have public water and sewer? So these are all questions that nobody is going to be nervous about asking or answering, I wouldn't think. Now, if the seller, or let's call him prospective seller, is nasty, is a jerk, right? Is like first thing you pick up the phone and you say, hello, real estate services, how can I help you? And they say, well, I'm not going to let you steal your house. I know what you scumbags are like. I'd give them one chance to back down from that. I'd give them one, let's see if they're kidding, right? Well, I'm going to need the address first so I can come steal it from you. Ha ha ha. But if you got somebody who seriously thinks that that's a good negotiating tactic, get them off the phone. You don't need them. I mean, you don't need that in your life, and the chances of you making a deal with somebody like that are pretty slim. So just write it off as somebody who's having a super bad day or maybe a super bad life, who knows, and move on. It's more common. Now we get that jerk call probably once a month, but we're doing a lot of marketing, getting a lot of incoming phone calls. It's more common that we get people who seem to think that a good way to negotiate is to be super closed-mouthed. So you start asking questions and they say, well, look, you wrote me the letter. Just come over to my house and make me an offer. It's not so much that they're being hostile as they're being uncooperative. That's another thing you shouldn't do. You should not jump in your car and go see somebody's house just because they want you to. The reason that I give people for needing to know the answers to their questions is, look, I've already had 3 other calls today. I'm going to get 5 more before the day is over. I cannot go look at everybody's property who wants me to look at it. There's just too many of you. So my process is sort of to find out if we're even vaguely on the same page. If we are, I will make an appointment whenever you want me to, and I will come over there and I will make you a hard offer. But for right now, I mean, I don't know anything about, I don't know if you got a property that I'm interested in. I don't know what kind of shape it's in, and I need to know those things. And if they still say, well, I'm not giving you that information, well, I'm sorry we couldn't help you then. Thank you for calling. If the caller does not know some of this information, which happens at least once a week to us, find out why they don't know. If they don't know because they are an out of estate seller who bought the property sight unseen, and they've hated the whole experience, and they just really, really, really want to get rid of the property. And they sound real cooperative about price. You don't have to know whether or not the property has a basement to go look at it, right? If they inherited the property and they don't know some of this information, that's okay. What you're trying to avoid is the folks who don't know the property who don't know the information because they don't own the property. And about 5 times a month, we get calls from wholesalers who don't want to admit they're wholesalers. Because when they start making those noises like, well, I'm not sure if it has a basement, and I'm not sure if, I don't know, I owe any money, or, you know, et cetera, we ask the question, are you a wholesaler? I don't mind if you are. It's okay if you are, but I sort of need to know so that I know how to proceed from here, and they still deny it. I'm not going to mess with people like that. That's not professional. Somebody who's, you know, understands their own business so little that they care whether or not a buyer knows that they don't own the house. Like, I'm not going to find that out eventually anyway. That's the end of that conversation. About twice a year, we get a call from somebody who is just nosing into some family member's business. It's, you know, mom is calling because she doesn't like the guy that her daughter is with, and she thinks that if she can get her daughter to sell the house, that the guy will move away. And seriously, like we don't even know if the daughter wants to sell. So the reason she doesn't know any information is because it's not her house. You need to find that out real quickly if the seller doesn't seem to know what's going on with the property. Is it their property and they legitimately don't know? And one of the best deals we did last year was a seller who called in. She called in January and said, oh, I just bought this property at the sheriff's sale. I owned the tax lien and I foreclosed on it. And it was a $22,000 tax lien. And I'm not looking to make a lot of money on it. I'll take $27,000 for it. And then she told me about the property. And it's in arguably the worst neighborhood in Cincinnati. And it took me about 2 minutes of investigating online to find out that it had gone through a foreclosure a couple of years back, and that apparently nobody had done anything with it since then. So it was easily 4 years since the last person lived in it. And I said, I hate telling people this, but I'm going to have to tell you this. Did I mention she was from out of town? I said, you bought a property in an area where a fixed up rental will sell for $50,000 to $55,000. And because it hasn't been lived in for 4 years, I 100% guarantee you that there's no plumbing, no wiring, no furnace, probably the shower heads are gone, and every piece of metal in the house is gone. There won't be any appliances. And that's not even getting into the fact that it hasn't been heated or cooled for 4 years, so all the paint's going to be peeling off the walls. And bottom line is, if I can give you $5,000 for this house, it'll be a miracle. And she said, oh my goodness, that's just not true. That's not true. I called a real estate agent, and she told me that $27,000 was a very reasonable price for this property. And I said, did she go inside the house? And the seller said, well, I think she did. And I said, did you give her a key? Well, no, I don't have a key. Well, I think all she did then was look online maybe. And I think you should call her and say, I am ready to list this property for $27,000. Let's go. And I'll call you back in a few weeks and see how that went. So I called back in a few weeks, and she said, I'm in huge trouble. I couldn't even get the realtor to go over there. I've called a couple of other ones, and now I'm thinking maybe I could take $15,000 for it. And I said, well, the problem is that I didn't tell you $5,000 because I was trying to upset you. I told you $5,000 because I think that's going to be the number. So whatever you think you need to do to get the most money back you can, go right ahead. Anyway, so these conversations kept happening once a month until May, when we put it under contract for $1,100. So she didn't know anything because she had made a horrible decision in buying a tax lien in a place she didn't understand, on a property she didn't understand, and then frankly she shouldn't have bothered to foreclose on it. If she'd have spent $300 on a plane ticket, she would have not spent $1,200 on that foreclosure. So anyway, if your person seems like impatient with the questions, because it takes a good 5 to 7 minutes to go through this questionnaire with people. So if they seem impatient, if they seem like they're rushed, ask them if there's a better time. Say I actually do. I've got a few more questions here. It's kind of important for me to know them before we both decide whether we should pursue this. Is there a better time for me to call you? If it gets really clear really quickly that it's just not going to work, just tell them so. It's a what? It's an old movie theater? Oh, you know what? I'm really looking for single-family homes. I'll tell you what, I don't even know anybody who buys that kind of commercial property, but if you don't mind, I'll take it to my local real estate association, and if anybody raises their hand and says they're interested, I'll pass your name and number on. Does that sound good? Okay, great, thank you. Get them off the phone. Don't spend a bunch of time. All right, so the next set of questions you'll notice is condition questions. This is where you are going to start to determine what sort of shape the property might be in. So there's the actual questions, right? Tell me what kind of roof it has, about how old it is, whether it leaks. Tell me about the plumbing. Are there any leaks there? Is it plastic or metal? What about the foundation? What about the furnace, the air conditioner, the windows? When was the last time the kitchen was updated? When was the last time the bath was updated? And then the final question you're going to ask, even after you've asked all this, is, well, if you were going to continue to, and then you're going to say either rent it or live there, depending on what they answered about that question, about do they rent it or live there, is there anything else you can do? And sometimes then other stuff comes out. I am going to encourage you to listen to the answers to these questions, because it is so common that at this point, motivated sellers are trying to sell you on making them an offer. So they kind of only halfway answer these questions. And here's the most common thing. You'll say, so tell me about the furnace. It's fine. Okay. Do you have any idea how old it is? No, not really. But it works really good. Okay. Tell me, what did you just hear? I just heard it has a really old furnace and it works fine, but you're still going to want to, you're a wholesaler, so your buyer is going to want to replace it, because if he's reselling the property, he's going to have to replace it, because no buyer is going to buy a house with a 50-year-old furnace in it. And if he's renting the property, he's going to want to replace it because he doesn't want tenants moving out in the middle of the winter because they can't afford their heating bill because they've got an incredibly inefficient 50-year-old furnace. So really listen for hesitation, so when was the kitchen last updated? I don't know, but it's fine. Well, how long have you lived there? 23 years. Well, did you update it? No, we never updated it, but it's good. All right, well, what are you going to write there? You're going to write old kitchen needs updating, right? The point of these questions is to give you sort of a basic idea of the condition of the property. And ultimately, it's going to let you make what we call a soft offer. If you come to any of these questions, and okay, you may have to, if you're new, you may have to hang up the phone, take a deep breath, think it through, write down all the stuff that you just heard we're probably going to need to be replaced. By the way, the paint and carpet always need to be replaced. Unless it's a newly rehabbed house, 100% of the time, the property needs paint and flooring. You just assume that. But it allows you to kind of go, well, this sounds like about $30,000 to $35,000 worth of renovation. So when I call the seller back, I need to tell them that 265 isn't going to work, and that I think I'm going to be closer to like 160 to 170, and see what they say about that. Right? That's a soft offer. Or if you kind of go through the numbers, you go, actually, the price he's asking sounds not too far out of the realm of reality, then it lets you call back and say, let's take the next step and come see it. And again, you might have to ask the questions in a couple of different ways. How old's the roof? Oh, you don't know? Well, are the shingles curly? You know, that sort of thing. Now we get to the questions that are a little bit more personal for the seller, and they're like crucially important to you. If you could only ask like 3 questions, they would be amongst these. But the whole purpose of getting to where you are now in the interview was sort of, build some rapport with the seller, laugh at his jokes, all that sort of thing. And now you're asking what really tells you whether the seller is going to sell cheap or not. Why are you selling? How long have you been trying to sell? By when do you need to sell? And what happens if it doesn't sell by then? If the answer to why are you selling is, well, I don't know, someday I'm going to look for a new house, what does that tell you? If you say, why are you selling? And they say, well, I actually wasn't, but then I got your postcard and I thought, what the heck? That's not a motivated seller. If you say, why are you selling? And the answer is, well, I moved out of town 3 months ago and I thought the property was sold, and then the deal fell through and I've got to get rid of this thing because the city's fining me for long grass. Okay, now we're talking, right? So these are the really crucial questions, but that you probably don't want to ask them first, for the simple reason that the other questions that were easy allows the sellers to relax. Again, listen. There's going to be with motivated sellers, there's going to be some hot buttons here. There's going to be, the problem is never as simple as I don't want this house, or the house is too rough. There's always these things that you will hear, like, my wife's going to divorce me if I don't get rid of this. This was a huge mistake. It's been a money pit, right? Those emotional reasons are the things that you want to be really listening for, because when you make your offer, you're going to come back to them, right? I can't give you the 265 you want, but the good thing is I can keep your wife from divorcing you. I mean, for $165,000, I can take that price house off your hands, and at least the wife's happy, right? Make sure you're making notes. And you notice there was a question in there about is the property listed? And if it is, you probably should not be pursuing it. If you're a licensed agent and the property is listed, you kind of need to stop the conversation and say, tell me about that, because I am also an agent and I really should be talking to your agent. And in fact, why isn't your agent calling me? Now, probably half the time, the seller will then say something like, oh, no, the agent's my sister-in-law, and we have an agreement that if I sell the property myself, I don't have to pay her, which is fine. Sometimes what they say is, my agent isn't doing their job. Well, as long as the property's listed, it doesn't matter if the seller perceives that the agent is doing their job or not. That agent is still due a commission. So you might have to say something like, well, do you intend to cancel the listing, or is it over soon, or do you want me to come see it while it's still listed? Because understand, if I do, you still owe that agent a commission. All right, last piece is the part about, what do you want for your house? How much are you asking? How did you decide on that? Sometimes people answer that in a really funny way. You'll say, how much are you asking? And they'll say $65,000. And you'll say, how did you decide on that? And they'll say, because that's what a new pickup truck costs. Or they'll say, because that gets me the money I want, which is funny because it has nothing to do with what the house is worth, right? Many times they'll say something like, it seems fair, or that's what a realtor told me. The answer I always look for is, I have the property appraised. And when they say that, I say, okay, let's talk about that. When did you have it appraised? Oh, in 2005. Okay. Do you think that appraisal is still good? And I also will ask why they had it appraised. Because sometimes it comes out at that point that it's an estate, or that they recently refinanced it, or something that's actually going to make a difference to how you proceed here. You ask them what they're asking, and then you ask them what they'd take, right? You ask them, what would you take for all cash and a quick closing? Is that your bottom dollar? Are you telling me if I can't pay you $65,000, I shouldn't bother to come look at the property? You're really trying to work them down to something that they have already decided, okay? In their mind, they already have a bottom dollar. You're just trying to find out what it is. If you cannot get the seller to give you a price, don't see the property unless, and we'll go back to this, unless it's one of those sellers that literally cannot price his own property because he's never seen it. Now, I still won't go see the property, but what I will do is I'll say, all right, Mr. Seller, listen, I'm going to do something I don't usually do. I'm going to go run some comps. I'm going to look at the history of this property. I'm going to come back to you, and I'm going to tell you roughly where I think we're going to be. And you can tell me whether or not you think that works for you. You just need to know, I get so many calls. I do not go see properties unless I'm in some agreement with the seller about what we think we might be able to shake hands on. So the purpose of the question about how much do you owe on the property is really because that, for not all sellers, but most sellers, that does set the bottom line price. I've had sellers bring money to closing. I've had sellers bring tens of thousands of dollars to closing, but most of them can't do that. So if they're saying their bottom dollar is 50 and they owe 50, then you know how they got there, right? And the only thing you can do if you don't think 50 is going to work is say, do you have any money you can bring to the closing, or are you current on your payments? Can we do a short sale? Or, well, it sounds to me like the best thing for you to do is keep this until you owe less. I say that a lot. So the purpose of the questions about, what's the rate payment term on the loan is if you are interested in pursuing creative finance options, those tell you kind of what direction that might go. The question about how did you decide on the figure is so you can understand where the seller's coming from, so that if his expectations need to be adjusted, you can do that. The ones who answer something about, I want this much money because I have this goal to go buy something else. The way I need $45,000 because I'm buying an F-150. I'm probably going to say, oh, is that what F-150s cost these days? Man, I haven't looked at the prices of those lately. How are you going to buy it if you don't get that much for the house? Right? Which is my way of saying, you're probably not going to get that much for your house. Now, those of you who are listening from California are going, why does she keep leaving the zero off the end of her numbers? Why is she talking about 45,000? She means 450. That must be some Cincinnati thing where they just leave the zeros up. No, I actually buy houses for $45,000 here in Cincinnati pretty commonly. All right, there's another set of questions over on the right that says if the property is a rental, and then it says unit 1, bedrooms, baths, rent, occupied, that you only use those if the property is a rental. The questions below that say check before sending, code violations, yes or no, and tax lien sold, yes or no, and taxes due now, that is for you to go back and research. You can ask, do you have any code violations? If they say yes, then they absolutely do. If they say no, they probably still 50% of the time do. Sometimes they're lying about it, but more often they just haven't been notified by the city. So that's for your own research. So a couple of general tips. Get familiar with the form so that you don't sound like you're reading the questions. That kind of puts people off when you're saying, and what is your name? And what is the address of the property? And how long have you owned it? You want it to be a little bit more conversational, and you can make it more conversational by just reading it out loud a few times, right? When you have a truly motivated seller, they're not going to let you go through the form because they just sort of vomit the whole story out before you can ask about it. You say, what's your name? What's the address of the property? And then you get the story about the dog died and the wife left and all that kind of stuff. And you're just writing as fast as you can. And you still want to do that because you don't want to go back later and say, oh my gosh, I can't run comps on this property because I forgot to ask how many bedrooms it had. You want to take every chance you can to build rapport. So when the seller says, oh yeah, it's a rental, you want to be listening for that kind of thing so that you can say, oh, have there been problems? And let him tell you about his tenant problems. When he says, well, yeah, I just put the roof on 10 years ago, but it's got to be replaced again because that idiot put it on wrong. Oh, yeah, some contractors, right? You're building, you need to build some affinity here. If you cannot help a seller in the way in which he wants to be helped, i.e., the only way he wants to be helped is full price, all cash right now, don't hesitate to tell them, I am not your solution. I hear you. I hope you get it. I am used to working with people who have a problem property that needs work and is priced accordingly. You sound like you got a great house and all the time in the world to sell it, and that's awesome. But it also means that I'm not your best buyer. And get them off the phone. Again, don't bother with the sellers who are hostile or crazy or aggressive. Try as much as possible to let those people roll off your back. If you're not getting told once a month that you're going to that somebody's going to sue you for sending them a letter through the U.S. mail. You're not doing enough marketing. I was talking to somebody over the weekend who said that she got a cease and desist letter. She was running to probate, and some attorney sends her a cease and desist letter and says, "Do not contact my clients ever again." And I was like, good for you. If you're not getting somebody who's nuts like that at least once a month, then you're not reaching out to enough people. Don't mess around with the wholesalers who don't want to admit they're wholesalers. When we said that like 60% of the time you got a seller who's not motivated and has no reason to be, and 20% of the time you've got a seller who's motivated and their price sounds pretty motivated, semi-motivated, and then you've got that other group that is their situation is motivated, but they just haven't come to reality about the price yet. Don't leave those conversations by just saying, "I can't buy your house." Tell them that you would be closer to some other price, and then follow up. Because sometimes what they need to snap them out of, "I'm going to get all the money in the world for my house," is hearing a different number, being shocked by it, being offended by it, and then letting it settle into their head for a few weeks and then revisiting it. I've made so many deals that way. I can't tell you. I could tell you story after story after story of people who, I have to sell because my house is going to a tax sale in 2 months. But I'm not going to sell it for less than I paid for it before I then beat the heck out of it, and then it got vandalized and was vacant for 2 years. I'm not taking less than that. And being honest with them, nice but honest, and saying, "Listen, that price is just out of reach. No one is paying that price for this house in this condition. You know that. And what you're telling me is the decision you have made is if you can't get everything, you're going to take nothing. Because if the tax sale happens, unless somebody like way overbids it, you're not getting any money." So what I would like to do is I would like to give you $68,000, which is half of what you paid, but it's in half the condition it was in when you paid for it. And then we'll use $28,000 to pay off your tax lien, and you'll get to walk away with $40,000, which I don't know. In my mind, it's better than nothing. You need to give them the price. So if you are coming to the Wholesale Academy, May the 18th to 21 in Philadelphia is the next one. If you're serious about getting started in this, move some stuff around and get to this one, okay? Because the next one's not until August. And the August one, because it's here in my local market, usually fills completely up by early to mid-July. So try and get to Philadelphia if you can. It's $19.97 for one person. For two people, it's $29.97. There are discounts on that available. If you already own my home study course, it's practically nothing to come. It's like $700 or something to come. If you're an Inner Circle member or an Express Success member, you get a discount. So go check it out on the website, because all these discounts there's check boxes for them. It may not, it's a bargain at $19.97, but it may end up costing you less than that. I'm going to be taking live seller calls at the Wholesale Academy, as I always do. I'm also going to be negotiating with sellers on the phone, which is going to make it a lot easier for you when you actually hear this. Like, I'm giving you examples, but when you hear it in real life, it's going to make you a lot more comfortable and confident about talking to people, because I don't talk to people, and I don't think you should talk to people in some really slick way that's like, "Well, if I had a way to solve your problem that involves you getting everything you wanted except not everything you wanted, you'd want to hear about that, right?" I mean, I don't sound like I'm luring people into an MLM, or I just sound like I'm talking to them. And that's how you should sound if you want to make deals. And I think that watching that is really helpful. which is why we do it live in the Wholesale Academy. Of course, we also go out and tour properties, which is huge. And we fill out contracts and comp houses and do all the things that you need to do deals. If you bring me some leads, I will evaluate them, but there's some criteria here, okay? First of all, don't bring me MLS sheets and ask me to evaluate them. The way that you make an offer on a listed property is you throw an offer at the wall and see what sticks. There's not really a lot of negotiation involved, and your best deals are not in the MLS right now anyway. So I bring me leads from decision makers, in other words, the owners themselves, not agents, not wholesalers, and not banks. It's got to be somebody that I can give you a negotiation strategy for. If you don't have any leads at this moment and you want to get some by the 18th, get out your Real Estate Goddess's Guide to Wholesaling, because I give you 8 different ways to find deals there. And when you sign up for the Wholesale Academy, I'm going to ship you those books, so you'll have time to start doing this. But what would be awesome is if you could do some mailings. I would suggest out-of-state owners. I would suggest probate. I'd suggest landlords who filed eviction, tax liens, divorces, things where people have a property and have a problem. You're going to need to get those mailings out in the next 7 to 10 days to get leads to bring to the Academy. If you're not quite prepped to do that yet, there's some other ways that you could get some practice and bring some leads. You could put up some bandit signs, understanding that they are illegal everywhere. You could get a sign on your car that says, I buy houses, right? You get some people calling you that way. Or if you have to, go driving for dollars and look for people who have signs in their yards that say for sale by owner or for rent, or just write down addresses of vacant, ugly houses and contact those folks. Or go to Craigslist and look for sellers who look like they're kind of motivated and have an ugly house, or go to Zillow and do the same thing. You guys are never, ever, ever going to make a 6-figure income wholesaling until you get used to the idea that it's all about the sellers. It's all about finding 20 sellers I can talk to so that one of them's going to sell me a house. So one of them's going to let me put their house under contract and I can make $10,000. The FSBOs need to have some sign of distress, okay? What I'm going to need to give you advice on your deals is fully filled out lead sheets, good comps, and I teach you how to do that in the home study course too, so you should not have any problem bringing me comparable sales, because I don't, unless it's in Cincinnati, I don't know your market. If you want me to tell you what to offer for a property, you got to get me some comps and just some sort of estimate of the ARV. If you have a really hot lead, oops, I didn't mean to do that. I touched my screen. If you have a really hot lead, don't wait 2 weeks to bring it to, because someone else will take it. When you come to the Wholesale Academy, you get 6 months worth of membership to the Inner Circle, which is an online membership site where you can contact me and say, hey, I got this question. Contact me if you like right now. If you've already started this process and you've got a hot lead, don't sit on it. Go to the Inner Circle membership site and give me all the details, and I'll work with you now, because it'd be great if you could walk into the Academy with the deal already under your belt, right? So to get your seat at the Wholesale Academy, you can either go to regoddess.com or you can call 888-ASK-VENA and grab one of those last seats. It's going to be a spectacular event. And now I'm going to see if we have any questions. Getting a lot of, okay, so are these questions about the download all fixed, Mr. Drew?
I sent out specific instructions in a reply to everyone. So if basically, let me just state it for people who aren't following this. If you open the Handouts tab of your GoToWebinar control panel and click on the name of the file, like a blank window will open in your default browser, Explorer, Firefox, Safari, whatever that is, and then it downloads to your browser's download file. So and it does it silently. It doesn't give you any notification. So if it just open your browser's download file, and since some of you I think have tried it several times, you'll find 6 copies of it stacked up, saved there.
Okay. All right. Fred says, I'm coming to Philly. Please ask your office to send out a confirmation with the location and the hotel room block. We will do that. In regards to the Academy, is it $19.97 per person? Even in the case of married couple, no, it's $29.97 for 2 people. And actually, Naomi, aren't you already in the inner circle? So don't you get 10% off on top of that? Here's a question. Jones says, is your acquisitions coordinator licensed? Every acquisitions coordinator I've ever had, except for the last one, eventually either came to us licensed or eventually got licensed, but they don't have to be because they are salaried employees of the company. You need a real estate license to be paid to buy and sell houses on behalf of other people, exception being if they are a salaried employee of the owner. My current one has the licenses in escrow. I suspect he's going to be pulling it out of escrow. Laura says, will we be able to listen to this again? Well, the lesson I have learned is that sometimes we get recordings, and sometimes the recordings are so bad we're embarrassed to put them out. So let me say this, Laura, I hope so, but we won't know until after I get off the phone here. Penny says it acts like it will open, but it never does, but I guess you just answered that. And she says, do we have a hotel yet? And the answer is yes, and I can't remember it. I always get Crown Plazas and DoubleTrees mixed up because they both are like, 2-word things. As many of you know, because you were there, we just came out of a very intensive 3-day conference, which rocked, by the way. Those of you who missed the Wild, Wonderful Woman of Real Estate event, you missed it. And we're kind of cleaning up the pieces, and we'll get a confirmation out to everybody about the hotel and the room block in the next day or two. Let's see. Wow, all of a sudden a whole bunch of questions popped up. Shahana says, when a buyer asks you what's your wholesale fee before agreeing to do the deal, what's the best way to respond? A fellow new wholesaler told her fee and the buyer slashed his offer in half. Well, okay, that buyer never gets another phone call, right? When a buyer says, okay, so what part of that is yours? This is your best answer. You ready? Let's cross that bridge after you've decided this is a good deal for you. Because the price isn't negotiable. I mean, it's the total price is $200,000. What part of it's mine is something we can talk about after you've decided that's a good deal for you. Because if it's a good deal for you, if it's not a good deal for you, it doesn't matter what part of it's mine. That's the nicest, politest way to handle it. Now, if somebody wanted to keep pushing me after that, I would probably say, well, let's talk about how much money you're going to make. I mean, what are you, the profit police? Most of them won't be brave enough to ask you a second time if you say, let's find out whether you like the deal before we talk about how much I'm making. Penny says, yes, it did. sorry about the Molding the Millionaire Mind rocking. After a test batch of 100 postcards goes out, how often do I mail them out again for a steady stream of leads? I bought your home study coaching and I'm applying for your mentoring program. Wild Wonderful One was amazing. Yes, it was. Okay, so a test batch of 100 postcards is not enough. Let's start there. 100 postcards is so few. I mean, think about it. If you get a 5% response rate, it's 5 calls back. That means that anything could cause you to get 3 or 7 and think that you had a much lower or higher response rate than you did. So 100 is just, I'm not saying it's not a good start. I'm not saying you shouldn't mail 100 postcards this week, 100 more next week, and 100 more the week after that, and 100 more the week after that. It's just, it's not enough to really call it a test mailing. You can't mail 100 and then go, oh, well, now I know what my response rate is. Secondly, and this is so often the case with real estate questions, the truly accurate answer to how often do I follow up is it depends. And what it depends on is who the prospect is. Different prospects have different kind of motivation arcs. Let me give you an example. Foreclosure, that's a real common, people like to do pre-foreclosure mailing. If you lived in Texas, you would need to send them something every 5 to 7 days because the entire foreclosure process in Texas from the day of the filing to the day it's on the courthouse steps is only about 60 days max. In Ohio, it's about 11 months. So in Ohio, you can be a little more laid back and maybe mail them once every month or once every 6 weeks. But obviously, you're going to stop at the point at which the foreclosure happens. With out-of-state owners, that's a list that doesn't actually change that much over time. If you bought a list of out-of-state owners today and then bought it again 3 months from now, it would only be like 7% different. 7% of people would have either sold or bought. And so their motivation isn't that there is something going to happen that's going to end their ability to do anything about the situation. That's what happens in foreclosure. With out-of-state owners, the motivation is more like, I'm having to evict that stupid tenant. Maybe this would be a good time to sell. So you sort of want to catch them when that happens. But an out-of-state owner, you might only mail them once every 3 months. So it depends. And we could go through that same analysis on every single different category, and we will after you get accepted into the mentoring program. How do I follow up with a seller when I want to offer less than my original offer? I made a mistake doing my initial research. That's a great question, and it's one that too many people get wrapped around the axle about it, because you just heard me say I tell people on the phone based on what they have told me. You want 265, I think I can do 165, and then new investors go, oh my God, what if it turns out that you can only do 150? Aren't they all angry at you? Well, no, I mean, of course not. I think based on what you've told me, I'm probably going to be closer to 165 now. And here's a key phrase. Write this down because it really relaxes sellers. And it takes the pressure off you too. Say, understand that I will make you the best offer I can. When I come out and look at it, if it's in better shape than I think it is, I'm going to give you a higher offer than that. But I'm just telling you from what I'm seeing from other sales prices and from what you've told me that I'm going to want to do to the house, that I think I'm going to be around 165. But it makes them feel better when you've told them that if they say 165 might be okay, that might mean they still get a higher offer. So if I have said on the phone 165 and I come out and look at it and it's really 130, it's always because they either neglected to mention something. They neglected to mention, well, yeah, it's a 4-bedroom, but you have to walk through 3 of them to get to the last one. Or they neglected to mention the high tension wires in the backyard. Or you know what? You've seen this, Jim. So I will just say, look, I know we talked about 165 on the phone, but I must have missed when I was looking at the Google Earth picture that you had this high tension wire in the backyard. You got to have had people tell you that they don't like living under those things. I mean, that really reduces this value. And if the problem is that you have already said, I will give you 165, and now you have to go back and undo that because maybe a buyer has said, Jim, did you not know that on this side of the street the houses are in a different school system than on that side of the street? That's where you whip out the whole, well, remember that purchase agreement we signed? It said that I was going to have people who knew more than me come and look at the house and tell me if I'd made a mistake. Well, they told me I made a mistake. So 165 isn't going to work. 130 would work. If that doesn't work for you, I totally get it. We'll just tear up the contract and you can go and try and find somebody who'll pay you 165, but I'm going to have to exercise that contingency because I'm at 130. What great questions you guys have tonight. I'm impressed. Okay, so that doesn't look like the end of them, though. So if you're coming to the Wholesale Academy, you have your marching orders. If you're not signed up yet, go to arigatis.com or 888-ASK-VENA is the number to get signed up. I'm sure if you call that right now, no one is going to answer because I think Drew and I are the only ones up. I think everybody else is sleeping it off today, and well-deserved. They worked hard this weekend. But you can certainly call tomorrow and get one of these last remaining seats. And I do look forward to seeing you there. We're gonna do some hard work, but you're gonna come out of it really prepared to get out there and kill it. Get out there and make that 6-figure income you're looking to make, and you'll have all the tools that you need to do that. So come on out to Philadelphia or plan to be in Cincinnati in August, and I will see you there. Everybody have a great night and happy investing.